over to him.
Hello, everybody at the Senior Center. My name is Tarun. I'm a current sophomore at Lambert. So I've been living in the US for my entire life, but I always make sure to stay in touch with my roots. And the dress I'm wearing on right now is called a kurta. It's like the traditional dress that most Indian men wear for like festivals. So we'll just wait for a jingle.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Next slide. All right, so South Indian culture basically involves the lower states of India, so basically the southern tip there, so the states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, and Telangana. And also some of its culture has diffused to them. So the island right below, which is called Sri Lanka, a lot of culture is shared between South India and Sri Lanka. And our culture is very similar to North Indian culture, but also shares a lot of differences, which is what we're going to talk about today. Next slide, please. Okay, so food, those are some of the foods. You may have seen some of them before. Basically, South India has a lot of cultures within it. It's basically a melting pot of so many languages, cultures, and so we have a lot of different cuisines, but in general, it's based around rice, lentils, and stew. So most foods are eaten with some sort of curry added. Dietary restrictions, a lot of people in South India are vegetarian, which means they cannot eat any meat. A lot of these dishes are gonna not include any of those, and this is mainly because meat, specifically like cows, are sacred in Hinduism, which is the dominant religion there. So going from left to right, the first thing on the left, that's called dosa. That's basically a crepe, which is wrapped up, rolled up, and then served with a couple of condiments there. To the right of that is called vada, which is basically like a salty donut. And the right of that is that white little pancake is called idli. And the first three dishes, those three dishes are all served with something called sambar, which is that little, the brown sauce thing on top of the idli. Yes, so lentil curry, basically. So, to the right of that is called pongal, which is basically served both just as a regular meal and also on special occasions. So we have a holiday called Thai Pongal, which is basically, we celebrate, it's a religious holiday where we also serve pongal. And to the right of that is, the far right item is called parotta, which is basically like a flatbread you have in South Indian culture. Next slide, please.
Okay, so religion in South India. So like North India and most of India, South India's main religion is Hinduism. So Hinduism believes in the worship of three main gods, Vishnu, Shiva, and Brahma, as well as many other gods like Krishna, Ganesha, Durga, and many others. So there's several sacred books like the Bhagavad Gita, and the Vedas, obviously. And then next slide, please. So the Dashavada. So the Dashavada is basically like all of the incarnations of Lord Vishnu. And so we in Hinduism believe that Vishnu takes these forms when the mortal world is in danger. So some of these forms like Rama, who killed the demon Ravana, and then Krishna, who helped the Pandavas slay the Kauravas, and then others. Next slide.
So some holidays and religious occasions. So for worship, the primary place to do that is called temple. So the most prominent here in Atlanta is called the Hindu Temple of Atlanta, which is the top right there. So a lot of people go there, like a lot of people each day, just to go. There are many things, such as just basic prayer, going there to see all the different altars and idols that are there. Or they might have something that, like, someone's birthday can be celebrated there by having a special blessing by the priest. But for other holidays, they can be celebrated both in and outside the temple. So we have something called Diwali, which is the Festival of Lights, which represents the god Rama coming back after killing the demon Ravana. So basically what we do in Diwali is we make candles. We light up candles outside our houses, which is what you can see in the top left. And also we light up fireworks and firecrackers. So come late October, early November, when you hear a lot of noise, firecrackers outside, that's Diwali. And another one is called Sankranti or Navaratri, which is the festival of harvest. And what's cool about this is people put up something called the Golu, which is a display of dolls depicting various elements and stories of Hinduism. That's what you can see in the bottom image. That's a really big one. You can see a lot of various dolls and statues. And what people do during Navaratri or Sankranti is they go to other people's houses and go visit their Golus. And they even eat snacks. So it's a really fun time for people to socialize and, look at other people's creations. Next slide, please.
Okay, so weddings. So South Indian weddings are very complex, to say the least. So weddings are split up into like 3 portions: the pre-wedding, the actual wedding, and the post-wedding. So the pre-wedding. The first function is called a roka, which is the Hindu word for stop, where a tilak paste of rice and roli, sacred thread, are put on the lovers' foreheads. And in this period, a lot of gifts are exchanged. And on the evening of that day, something called mehendi or henna is like put on like for only girls, and it's like artistic designs. And then on the actual wedding day, the venue, the groom walks in on like a mare or a horse, and the groom is welcomed by the bride's parents, where the tilak paste is once again put on the groom's forehead. And then a muni ceremony introduces each of the bride and groom's relatives to the guests. So more ceremonies and rituals happen under the guidance of a priest, like specially hired for the occasion. And the final step involves a couple taking 7 laps around a sacred fire or sacred haven, where they officially become husband and wife. Next slide, please. So weddings continue, the post-wedding. So after all of this, now the wedding just becomes a very fun event. So a reception happens at a later time, often at another venue, a banquet hall or the groom's or bride's house. Friends and family give speeches showing their appreciation for the couple, and more gifts are exchanged, and many times the dance floor is opened. Next slide.
So funerals, basically 3 parts. The first part is just a regular funeral, a celebration of that person's life in the family's home or another venue. Then we have something called cremation, which is where we take the deceased's ashes and we spread them. And the Shraddha ceremony comes after that. So a Hindu funeral usually takes place very promptly, usually 1 to 2 days after death. No gift or flowers are brought to the funeral unless they're sent ahead of time. And it's kind of like a wedding. A Hindu priest also presides over the funeral. They chant mantras and oversee everything. Though at the cremation ceremony, it's actually the eldest son who presides, with the priest just overseeing the activities. On the right there, you can see we celebrate the deceased using a lot of garlands and flowers to decorate their coffin. Next slide, please.
So sports. So Indians like to play a lot of sports, but the most prominent one is cricket. So cricket came from like the British when they colonized India, and Indians have, let's say, loved the sport. So what is cricket exactly? So cricket is a game of bat and ball, where one team tries to score runs and the fielding team tries to stop them. So each team has 11 players, and the game ends when one side scores more runs than the other side. So there are many iconic Indian players like Virat Kohli, MS Dhoni, Kapil Dev, Rahul Dravid, Sachin Tendulkar, Anil Kumble, and Saurav Ganguly. So cricket in India. The BCCI is the governing body of cricket in India. There are lots of different trophies and teams around the league. Some notable cups, first-class cups, include the Ranji Trophy, Duleep Trophy, and Irani Trophy. The The Indian national squad is currently ranked by the ICC, the main organization, at number 3 in the world. The IPL, arguably the biggest hit in India, is a professional men's cricket league with lots of famous cricket players from around the world. It is one of the most attended events, I think 5th in the world overall. And once again, it was adopted by the British, from the British. Next slide, please. Language. So India is a very large country, so it should come to nobody as a surprise that there are many, many languages spoken around India. However, the Indian government officially recognizes 22 main ones, and the ones in South India are Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, and Kannada, which are among the most spoken. And then on the right, you can see a graphic with like the most spoken languages in India. And as you can see, there's Telugu with 94 million, Tamil with 77 million, and then Malayalam at like 35 million. Next slide, please. And then more graphics. The one graphic on the left is showing where all of the languages are spoken. So you can see Hindi in North India, and then Telugu in the states of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Me personally, I'm Telugu. And then on the right side is when each of these languages were officially recognized by the government. Next slide, please.
So South Indian clothing, the most, for women, the main cultural attire is a sari or a half sari, which you can see at the top. However, for young girls, they usually start out wearing what's kind of like the equivalent of this called a kurti. And something interesting about that is that they actually hold a special ceremony for girls when they come of age. They have a ceremony for when they try on a sari for the first time. So that's kind of like a birthday tradition there when they come of age. So for men though, you can see right here, me and Tarun are wearing a kurta, which is kind of like a tunic. It comes down to our legs. And that usually goes with either something called a dhoni, which is like kind of like a cloth. You can see the guy on the right. He has like a cloth wrapped around his legs. That's called a dhoni, or just like pajama pants to go with a kurta. Yeah, kurta. So for South Indian dancers, though, they actually have something really interesting. They have the traditional outfit plus a lot of makeup, clothing, accessories. So for dance, clothing is a really big deal, so I thought that would be interesting. Next slide, please. So for entertainment, probably the biggest source of entertainment in South India is the film industry. So Bollywood films basically cover a variety of genres. Today, they'll include lots of elements in one movie, not just action, not just drama. It'll be like a mix of a lot of different things. And to accommodate for the many languages present in South India, they'll usually do dubs or subs, which is basically like adapting the film to the many different languages. So a film may be originally filmed in like Tamil, for example, but it might be dubbed or reshot in Telugu to accommodate both the Tamil and the Telugu speakers, and it goes beyond that for the many different languages. So the guy on the top left is Vijay. He is a Tamil actor and one of the most famous South Indian actors. But on the bottom is basically the movie Bahubali 2, which is one of the biggest blockbusters that happened in recent years. And that was also, I think, predominantly South Indian. And it was also based on Hindu mythology, which is something interesting about that movie. And another thing about entertainment is television series or serials, which are also very popular. So the two main kinds I've seen are soap operas, which are very dramatic and emotional representations of life, and also reality or game shows, which is, you can see on the top, which is Super Singer, which is basically like American Idol over there. It's one of the biggest, most longest running series there. Next slide, please. So travel, basically to get to Atlanta to India or South India, you need to use a connecting flight. So two of the routes I know of are going to Britain and then connecting to India or going to Qatar. And what happens usually is people usually request their friends to come bring back things from India. So if someone were to go to India, they'll usually ask you like, oh, would you like me to bring you anything? Because there's so many things there that we value that can only be found there. Like such as clothing, like these clothes, sometimes the best ones can be found there. They're made by people in there. So in India itself, South India and Sri Lanka, they have something called the Southern Railway. So there's a good railway system there to traverse that part because the continent is so big and people are spread out so wide. And this railway covers the states of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Pondicherry, and a little bit of Andhra Pradesh. And the most iconic form of transportation in South India is bottom left. It's called the auto rickshaw. So that's kind of like the basically your taxi in India and Sri Lanka. You see them all over the place. You can book them. I think you can pre-book them, or you can just hail one. But that's probably the biggest, most signature vehicle of Indian transportation. Next slide, please. So music, the most traditional form of cultural music is called Carnatic music, which is South Indian classical. Traditionally, the concert format is one singer accompanied by a violinist and one or two percussionists. So on the bottom right, you can see there's a singer in the middle, a violinist on the right, and then a mridangist in the left. That's kind of what that two-sided drum is. And then there's another percussionist in the back. And then there's something called the tambura, which is that long sticking instrument. That's basically like a drone. It'll like keep the pitch, or what we call shruti. So basically songs in Carnatic music are set to ragas, which are basically scales, and also talams, rhythmic patterns. It's very similar to Western classical in that sense. And it also includes a lot of improvisation, or manodharma, which is, and also like sliding from note to note, which is very similar to jazz. So on the violin, which we have today, strings are set to a different pattern than Western, with varying pitches depending either on the vocalist's range, if they're accompanying a vocalist, or their own desire, if they're performing solo. And they will also sit down instead of standing up in all cases. So on the top, those are basically the original trinity of composers. Though a lot of songs today can be traced back to them either directly or through their students. And to the right of that is called the veena, which is also a very traditional instrument in South Indian culture. So that's also performed usually solo. Okay. So on the topic of music, now we have Tarun, who will be performing a special South Indian song now. So.
How long have you been playing? 6 years. How many years?
6.
6 years.
So a quick note that that's actually an app he's using to substitute for the tambura in this case. So yeah.
Okay, so before I start, the song I'm playing is called Entho, Prema in the Ragam Surutti. It's basically the composer saying, oh Krishna, I'm doing you with so much devotion, why do you keep ignoring me?